Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. Sunscreen sales in the GTA have perked up in 2025. What was once a suffering industry on a declining trend has now become a prime opportunity for sun-loving entrepreneurs citywide. Interestingly, sunglasses and hats have made a comeback too, even despite rolling into the cooler winter months. Experts who follow these trends closely were puzzled about the recent resurgence and proliferation of boutique sun-related suppliers. The original hypothesis was that increased global warming may have been a contributing factor. This theory was quickly put to rest when researchers found that the forward-thinking government had already carbon-taxed global warming out of existence. After several more studies were conducted, the answer was discovered in an unlikely source. As it turns out, with fewer condo towers being erected for shade, people are simply pivoting to other shade-inducing and skin-protecting means. Today, we are talking to Jeremiah Shamess, Executive Vice President at Colliers. Jeremiah knows a thing or two about the real estate development scene in Toronto and surrounding areas. We want to know what's going on with condos, what actually happens in a distressed market, how do we get here, are lenders going broke, what is the path forward, and are there any opportunities? We're super appreciative of Jeremiah taking the time to share his insights with us. If you want to follow him on X, it's at JShamess. To get in touch with the show, visit twostewards.ca. Remember, this show is not financial advice, but is valuable for listening amusement purposes. And now, Jeremiah Shamess.
We are back, and we've got special guests today. We've got Jeremiah Shamess. He's Executive Vice President at Colliers. Is it international or is it?
Yeah, Colliers. Yeah, Shamess.
Okay, just Colliers. Shamess. Sorry, I should have known that. I just want to say, by the way, great name. I've got a boy named Ezekiel and one named Isaiah. So we don't see a lot of Jeremiahs out there anymore.
No, yeah, it's not that common. It means Jehovah tears down, Jehovah builds up. It's upwards and downwards, I guess.
It's a real estate, real estate kind of name for development.
So, thanks for coming on with us, Jeremiah. You're, I think, a fairly recognized guy in the commercial space, and we were talking before, like most of our listeners will probably be in the retail space, but it's good to get insights from lots of different angles, lots of different points of view. So before we dive right into it, I've heard you before, but how did you get into real estate? I think that was kind of an interesting journey in 30 words or less.
Yeah. Well, no, I my entire family was doctors. I thought I wanted to go into medicine, and then I was at Western on the rowing team, and getting up at 4 a.m. and coming into physiology class at 8 a.m. and realizing I don't think I can do this for 6 years. I need something more practical. And so, although I have a lot of I guess respect for what those do in the medical field, I decided to go into business. And at that time, I really could not get a job anywhere. And so I started just straight cold calling all these commercial real estate companies. And one of the managing directors at Colliers took notice to it and said, you're basically doing what we do in the job. You're hunting down contacts and getting a hold of people and finding information. And so I was able to get an interview with Colliers for a research analyst job after doing a lot of studying and working to understand that business. And then they actually passed on me, so I didn't even get the job.
Oh, man.
And it ended up being that about 3 weeks later, they called me up and said, well, the other person didn't work out and you were the runner-up. So you come up. I love to remind my president that I was number 2 when I came in. So it ended up being, top 6 under 6 and one of the youngest EVPs. So it was a fun growth pattern. But, the point I think I learned is just that you can never take no for an answer. You got to get to your goal no matter what.
Yeah, that's okay. So that's cool. A little bit of inspiration for our younger folks, right? I don't know. You got to keep trying. Keep trying.
Yeah. You never know what happens.
And even if you're not in sales, sales is an important skill to have, right, in so many areas of life, especially when you're trying to get a job. So there you go. Second best Shamess, as we call them. So I want to talk a little bit about some trends in real estate, I guess. You're mostly in the GTHA, right?
Yeah. Mostly Toronto and downtown Hamilton. We do a little bit of work here and there, like we sell farmland over in Cambridge, but we have a larger team, and we concentrate mainly on representing sellers of development land, and then we sell buildings as well. So, office buildings, retail plazas, and apartment buildings.
Okay. I think this is a little bit off topic, but I think you might have sold a project I had invested in Niagara Falls. I don't know if that sounds familiar. On
Fred?
No, Stanley District.
Yeah, Stanley District.
Is that yours? Did you sell that twice? Is that possible?
No.
It went into receivership, right?
Yeah, exactly. We sold that for the lender for $22 million. It was actually an interesting project. That was a very difficult project to sell, and 4 towers approved. It also had a TIG on it, so after it was completed, there was a tax abatement back to the developer for building it. So it was a very interesting project, complex, 429 sales already completed in 1 tower. So definitely a really good project, but I guess the original developer, unfortunately went bankrupt on the site, and the lenders took over and had to recoup their cost. And we sold it basically for the cost of debt.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think there was much profit there. I think the debt was pretty much there with all the cost involved and like a lot of legals, right? And fees on top of that. But, nice project overall. I hope you didn't lose any money.
Not yet. I think it's protected by Terrion, so we'll see. We're waiting on that. But
you bought a unit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to my knowledge, they're building it. I mean, obviously I'm not involved now, but that was a key point of selling the development lands, the fact that there were sales in place already. So you're definitely protected by Terrion, I believe, anyways, from my understanding. And the new developer, it wants to build it out with those sales in place. So he wants to deliver it to the people who have bought projects.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. So, speaking of
there, Mark.
Yeah. No, we're talking about condo developments, right? We've seen, everybody's been talking about this, right? They've fallen off a cliff. New things. And I saw you had a chart somewhere about projected builds and develops. And so we've got sort of a glut right now, right? Would you say that in condos that are available, mainly because people aren't buying, not necessarily because of the market? But then what does that look like 3-4 years out?
Well, there's a number of different data sources that have been tracking this, so it's hard to tell exactly what is right and what is wrong. But effectively, right now, the condo sales market is dead. Right? I think we all know that. There's very little sales that are happening right now. I think in the last quarter there was maybe 1,200 sales, maybe at total. So at the end of this year, I believe that there's going to be ending up somewhere around 3,000 sales, maybe total.
Wow.
For the entire area. And, just to give some context, in the top of the market, there was, I think, close to 36,000 condos sold. So, quite literally, you are a percentage of
that
the top of the market.
Does that include like resale and new construction, or that's...
No, that was new construction. New. Yeah. We're talking about this right now, the new construction condo development business, they were selling condo sales and everyone was pre-selling the projects, right? What happened is that market completely stopped because, for a number of reasons, but I think mainly due to a lot of the assignment buyers and a lot of the growth in the pricing. The pricing just went far too quickly upwards, and everyone was trying to chase this market, and eventually just caused an affordability crisis and actually being able to afford the product afterwards. So that market is really effectively stopped. And we are still delivering projects that have been sold like kind of 3-4 years ago, right? So the project you bought in Niagara Falls, if that had continued, it probably would be halfway done completing, and it would probably be maybe somewhere completed and finished in 26, 27, right? So you would have delivered your condo unit, you would have closed on it with a mortgage, either moved into it or rented it out. Well, what's happening now is a lot of the projects where the land was bought in 2017, which is another high point in the market, are now being delivered. And so in the past 6 months, there's a record number of units being completed, almost 22,000 units. And, kind of is a little bit scary to, I think, most people who are owning condos or even potentially buying, right? And what that has done is it's created this kind of supply gap where the new buyers are so few that they're able to be much more aggressive in their purchasing. And the buyers that have existing purchases, their pricing is probably, in some cases, 20, 30, 40% above where a condo is going to sell today, right? So, that's the discrepancy. And what's happened is all those units that have been completed, there are a certain amount of defaults that are happening. And from those defaults, you have new supply coming on the market, and it's being absorbed at a much lower price point. So all that to say is that, to your question, Mark, there is roughly, I believe, somewhere around 36,000 units completed last year. This year, I believe it's closer to 40,000 total. And then next year, I believe it's even higher. I think it might be the highest point in the market, somewhere around 41, 42,000. So depending on which data source you get, the last 3 years have been the single highest years for completion of product, not sales, in Toronto history. And so after 2026, that number starts to drastically move downwards. And at the point where 2028, it will be back below the 10-year moving average for condo sales being completed, for projects and units being completed. So we're quite literally going way up, and we're on the crest coming down right now. So, and what that does to the market is it causes a massive amount of supply that has to be absorbed, right? So either the person buying it, say like yourself, has to, close on it and actually either live in it or, rent it or sell it. It's very difficult to sell it today. So most people have been renting it if they're not living in it, right? And this is probably the only green spout in the market, like the only positivity in the market, is that we have a record number of condo rental leases being signed in the last quarter. There was 20,000 leases signed in the third quarter of this year. The data just came out. So although the condo market is quite literally dead and, distressed in some ways, defaults on condo completions, the rental market is incredibly strong still. And, put an asterisk on this. The rental market is still going down. The rents are going down. They went down 4.5% this year, and they went down about, I think it was 2% last year. But overall, they're still up 6.2% since 2022. So it's this weird dichotomy of a market where you have basically every facet of residential real estate is not doing well. The only part of the business that is doing well is the absorption of rental. So even though we have this massive amount of supply coming on, a lot of it is actually being absorbed as rental. So to me, what this says is that the entire market is, for lack of better words, choosing to say, I don't want to buy anymore, but I still want to live in these areas, so I'm just going to rent. And most people are not making the decision to rent at the high prices, right? They're saying, they're looking for something more reasonable. And there's so much choice out there right now that the rents are coming down. So some will have you tell that this is a major fire sale of rentals because all these rents are coming down, et cetera, et cetera. I don't believe that to be a major risk, because we just have to look at this market like, wait a second, if rents are going down 4.5%, but they're still up 6.2%, since 2022, and we have the most supply that has ever been completed in the last 6 years, in the next 6 months, the next 6 months is also going to be a massive amount of supply. So by next year, or in the next kind of 2-3 quarters, we'll be able to understand, is all this rental going to be absorbed? And then we'll be able to understand how healthy is our market. And if that next 6 months and all those units are actually being absorbed, then we'll be able to say in 6 months that, you know what, although the sale market has completely changed and dropped back to more reasonable prices and may even continue to fall, the rental market is still there. The amount of people that are choosing to actually rent versus buy is still a significant portion. And to me, that's a really, really strong indication to those that actually are landlords, and those who build apartment buildings, and those who, maybe, build a, 4-plex, a 6-plex, a multiplex, or even just have one unit they're going to rent. I think that's a strong indication that if you want to be a landlord, at least there are going to be renters. And, obviously it comes with some asterisks like location, style, everything, right? There's better. But I'm just speaking generally, this is a bright spot. And because we could come on here and we could speak how negatively it is, and we could talk about the doom and gloom of the market all day long. And, I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I get angry replies all the time saying this is the end of the world and the market's blowing up, and how dare you talk about positivity, right? But, everyone in the market is so negative. It's easy to be negative. It's not hard to do that. That gets clicks, that get views. But to actually find points in the market that are still reacting very positively, I think this is rare. And one of those points is the absorption of rental product.
Well, you just ruined our podcast. We were counting on the negative, but...
Listen, if you want to get into negativity, we can start talking about that. Remember, I sell development land, so most of my clients right now are lenders in the court, right? So,
oh yeah, okay.
At least once a week, I'm replying to an RFP of a bankrupt developer to sell development land for a site that has gone bankrupt, or someone who stopped paying either a power of sale or a receivership. So, I mean, listen, there's lots of negativity if you want to talk about it.
No, we want an honest look.
Yeah.
Well, is that a recent development, that receivership stuff? Because rewind a couple years, like 2022, was it more to paint a picture for listeners, like you are taking land that has been owned historically by one person, and now, hey, I can put a condo tower on this thing, so you're going to step in and kind of help the seller or the owner who's maybe held this thing for 30-40 years offload it and get the maximum amount for it. Is that basically your kind of pitch? And now you're saying you're not getting as many of those clients, and you're getting more on the receivership side, where a developer went through with the transaction, now they're failing and not being able to deliver the product and going belly up?
Yeah, effectively. So what I do is I represent sellers of development land and buildings. So if you own, an office building or an apartment building, or a retail plaza, and you want to sell it, and you want to sell it for the highest price possible, you're going to hire me and my team, and we're going to go out there and get as many buyers as possible for you. Development land's a little bit different. It's traditionally the sellers could be, a family that has owned it for 30-40 years. I sold 125 acres in Cambridge for, a farmer who owned it for the past 50 years. And he had one new partner, but we went out and we found a buyer of that. We sold that. It was a $50 million transaction. This is something that was held forever. He was a private owner, but there's a new tranche of sellers that has emerged in kind of the last 5 years. These are the actual developers of the land, the ones who have entitled the land with new approvals or some kind of new zoning that has changed this use of the land. And they're the ones now hiring me. They're the ones that used to be buying from me. Now they're the ones hiring me to sell it. But in the past, call it 15 to 18 months, those developers who had bought the land in order to put it into production to actually build the units, some of them have not been able to continue to pay for the land debt that is there, like their debt service, we call it. So they're not able to pay their mortgages, right? And the reason for that is that land is a negative carry, right? Like you buy land, there's no income on it. Unless you buy it all cash, you have to continue to service this mortgage, right? Until you actually get the project started. And traditionally, it's been pre-sell 70 to 80% of the condo units, go get a construction loan. The construction loan will then take out the mortgage on the land, and then you can start construction. And that's what everyone's been doing for the past 25 years. And since then, that market has completely disappeared. That now either as a developer, you have to buy out that mortgage, or you have to continue to service the debt on the mortgage, or you have to get a new lender who believes in that loan. And
it's
so
just that's disappeared just because they can't make their pre-sales.
Exactly.
Like
you can't really sell condos. There are a few exceptions. The exceptions are luxury real estate. So say downtown in Yorkville, there are still projects selling units, but we're talking, $2,000, $3,000 a square foot, high-end, 5-star luxury product. That's still selling. There are a few other smaller projects that are still selling. On the low-rise side, there are low-rise sites that are selling, townhouse sites and single-family home sites. Richmond Hill, Aurora, areas like this. York region is still selling some of these. But for the most part, it's very hard to sell a pre-construction condo or home or townhome. So what has changed is the market is now shifting to a rental product. And because of that, the developers who don't know how to change to a rental product and they can't continue to pay for their mortgage, the lender is taking over. And there's two forms of distress in our market. One's called a receivership. The other one's called a power of sale. There is technically a third. The third is CCAA, but that's more of an overall company structure to protect the entity when going through like kind of a distress situation. So that would be more like company-wide CCAA. But for the purposes of just what we're talking about, selling land, there's a receivership and there's a power sale. Power sale proceeding is when the lender directly goes to sell the property. The receivership is when they hire a court-appointed receiver who then goes to the Ontario court, gets in a sale-approved process by going out and hiring the specialist to then sell that, and they act as the owner, right? The easiest analogy is a receiver is practically a new captain of the boat. You're an owner of a boat. You want to make sure it goes from point A to point B. You get rid of the current captain, you put in a new captain by court order. And technically that new captain is working for the court as a court-appointed receiver, and they need to run a fair and proper process so that the borrower can see that, if there is additional proceeds above and beyond what their loan is, they are allowed to actually get those proceeds. If it's not, and it's run where, the costs are less, then that borrower may have some guarantees that, the lender may have to come after for it. So that's kind of the two big parts of the distressed market. And that's kind of how you explain what's been happening in the development land market.
Just in the last few years, like the last couple of years.
Yeah, more or less the last 2 years. And it's really sped up in the last 12 months.
Do you think it's going to keep going?
Yeah, it will keep going. Yeah, until there is a more stabilization of the for sale product. So until a developer can actually go and pre-sell a condo. What is this? Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry, we're still working away here. The whole team's here. It's until you can find that for sale product, then, the market will continue to be distressed, because as a developer, if you don't have a path forward with your land, you're in a bit of a tricky situation. So I feel badly for people who are just service providers. They just wanted to build homes. They wanted to get into construction. Now they can't find that revenue. So the entire market is switching to rental product, and you either have to go through a CMHC loan or if you go through a traditional loan, but it requires a lot more cash into the deal. So a condo project, you could take the pre-sales, you could take a bond out on those pre-sales. So you could borrow effectively, let's just call it, for argument's sake, about 65% of the total deposits held. You could use that as cash equity into the construction loan for the total equity required to build the building. So if you're building, a 300 unit building and it's got a $100 million construction loan, you would have to go borrow about 25% of the equity required to build it. But since you pre-sold all these condos, you're able to take out a loan against those condos, and that makes up for about, let's call it 10 to 15% of the equity required. So the last tranche of cash you put in, and the other is the deposits, and the rest is construction loan. That's what happened, right, with the capital stack, how to build it. With a rental building, that capital, you still need 25% cash to actually put down to get the construction loan. The difference is now you don't have a bond to borrow against to put that cash in. So all of a sudden, overnight, a developer, say, had $15 million cash saved up to do their construction. They have to come up with an extra $10 million cash on this $100 million construction loan. And overnight, you have developers saying, oh, where do I get that, right? So there's kind of three things they're doing. Number one, they're bringing on another partner in order to find that. So they're, saying, okay, you put up the cash, I already have some cash into it. Number two, they're going to an affordable housing product. So you can go to CMHC and you can do what's called an apartment loan construction program. And that is allowing you to go at a higher equity, but you have to provide a certain amount of affordable housing. And then the third tranche is quite literally is selling off to another developer who has cash, right? So these are kind of the three things that are happening in the market today. And then obviously the fourth is I can't pay for it. I go distressed and the lender takes it back.
So who's taking the hits mostly on these projects? Because, presumably there's still value in the land, in the whatever development's been done. So it'll go distressed. And then so number one, are people buying the distressed product? And then who's taking the biggest hit? I mean, I'm assuming it's the developer, because the banks, whoever's done the loans, will have some kind of title or protection on that, on the land or on the project, right? Yeah,
for the most part, the developer's equity has been wiped out on many of these projects. It's quite sad, but it's a market changing, and it's a cycle happening, right? So the developer's equity is wiped out. If there was any second mortgage on the project, usually it's wiped out. Right now, most of the time, again, I'm speaking in generalizations. There's examples anecdotally that have been okay, where the developer has that equity, the second mortgage has been okay. But for the most part, developer and second mortgage and any other, mortgages on there, they've been taken out. So the lender is then left with the last tranche of capital in a first position on a mortgage. They're trying to figure out what to do with it, right? And for many of these, there is not a lot of buyers for development land right now. Now, mind you, there is still buyers at certain pricing. Fortunately, our team, we've been quite active in this space, and we have been able to sell a bunch of these projects. Some high profile ones I can talk about publicly. Van Dyke, was a major developer who went completely bankrupt. We sold one of their projects. We have another one for sale right now, so we were able to recoup some of that capital. And Stateview, which is another kind of high-profile one, we were able to sell one of their projects in Vaughan, townhouse site, where we recoup that capital too. But there are examples of situations where the lender will not get all of their cash equity back. So the lender is now trying to figure out what to do. And in many cases, this lender has started to become a developer themselves. And that's kind of what's happening at this point. The developer is then going out and finding another actual developer to come in and work the project with them. And because most of these lenders are, sorry, I think I misspoke. The lender is going out to find a developer to help them finish the project off. But for most of these lenders, they don't have debt, right? They are the debt. And let's just call it for what it is. Most of the land money out there is non-bank lenders. So it's not a lot of tier one banks. Some tier one banks like RBC, CIBC, did quite a bit of this. Scotiabank a little bit, TD a little bit. RBC would, they're doing more farmland. So anyways, like these banks were doing a ton of it. The credit unions were doing a little bit more. And so most of the land debt out there is non-bank lenders. And what I mean by non-bank lenders is, quite literally, there's a few that are publicly traded, but for the most case, they're private corporations, firms that have raised outside cash that has been used to lend out to the development industry. And the reason for this is because for a long time, it was a really good business. Most of these lenders were doing between 9 to 12%, even in the low interest periods. Like most of them didn't want to take less than like 8, 9%. Like, at the time, it'd be prime plus 6, 7, 8, right? Now it's like prime plus 5, prime plus 6. So it was a good business for a long time, right? But all that was not borrowed money. So everyone talks about this major structural problem in the market. I just don't see it because yes, the development land market is going through major issues, but it's all cash. It's not like it's borrowed against bonds and then they're not going to be able to repay this. And it causes this kind of cyclical problem in the market where people are not getting repaid and it's more and more and more debt. It's mostly just all cash that was raised from high net worth individuals, institutions, pensions, all kinds of different private equity groups. So that's what's happened in the market. It's just there's a lot of money has been lost, really. And so to answer your question specifically, they're just trying to figure out, what do we do with this? Do we take the best dollar we can get? What I have been seeing in the market is for the most case, a lot of these lenders don't want to take major losses because they are made up of investors who are saying, hey, in like 3 to 4 years, the market may be okay. So why are we going to take a major loss? Let's just become the developer. So they're converting that debt into an equity stack. They're using, the rest of their money to go borrow against and to do a construction loan to build a rental building. They're finding a developer, and the developers may be putting a little bit of cash in, but they're hiring them to go do the project. So a lot of these developers are going out and they're doing what's called workouts, right? They're just working out the project and they may have to build it. Some of them are taking losses on their loans, but we're not seeing major losses like we did in the 90s, where it was like, pay 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar.
So just so I understand, like a workout, you mean they would have, like the developer, let's say they own it now, the lender would take possession of it or like take responsibility, and then the developer would just keep working on it, but not take any of the upside. Like, is that what you're?
No.
Yeah,
it's a good question. Yeah. For the most case, the developer has gone bankrupt.
So the developer's out of the question. You've got a new. Yeah. Okay.
If they're on the hook for personal guarantees, the lender can then go and sell it, take a loss, and go after the borrower for those guarantees. So, it maybe not a great story to talk about, but like if they own a house, they can go after that house and they can sell that house. Right. So that's, when these lenders have taken loans out, they ask for guarantees and they say, can you guarantee the loan? The lender signs their personal residence. They sign everything. So they have to go and look for it.
So are you seeing like consolidation between different developers? Like, are we getting a lot of the developers that are going out of business or going belly up in this situation? Are they like inexperienced, or are these some big guys? And is all the work kind of falling on a few, really experienced ones or larger firms, or how is that shaking out?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of larger developers who are taking advantage of this. Publicly, we can talk about Tridel. They took over the project, the one at Yonge and Bloor, pretty high profile project, but they're not putting any money into it. They were hired as a service provider, as the developer to run the project. So right now there's a flight to quality, and the same way like lenders are saying, we don't know what to do with this project, they may want to go hire high profile developers who are not in trouble, who do have the ability to take on and work through the project, the workout, as I say. A lot of the developers that are going bankrupt, save and except for a few high profile cases that, I think are in the news and most people know the names, but like Stateview and Van Dyke that have kind of ceased to exist. There are some other, I would say, middle, upper, and middle lower tier developers that are mostly all kind of disappearing, I would call it, going bankrupt, have too much land debt, not able to push the project forward, don't have enough cash to service their mortgage on the land, and they've now disappeared.
So one of the things that part of the doom and gloom of the whole condo crash.
There's the negativity coming back, Mark.
No, but I want to understand this a little bit better because I was, I don't know, concerned. I mean, this isn't really my, I'm not directly involved, but a little bit worried about like, okay, if this happens, number one, are we going to see like tons of construction workers out of business? And then are we going to see banks tightening credit because they're taking losses? So what I'm getting from you is that this is mainly a private equity loss, for the most part, and that a lot of these projects at the right price will actually continue. So maybe we're not going to see like all the carpenters in Toronto out of work. Slowdowns for sure, but it doesn't seem as apocalyptic maybe to the economy in general as it may have been, especially when banks start tightening credit, then that's, that bodes poorly for everybody, right?
Yeah, listen, we have to be realistic here. There are a ton of job losses that are happening already. Construction costs have come down considerably, and from what I've heard, there has been significant firings in different construction firms and development firms. So there is some serious problems. I mean, this is Canada's great financial crisis. We are seeing it in the new home market. It truly is sad, and it is quite ugly out there in some cases. The difference with Canada versus the US is that we are not having the apocalyptic, completely, ghost towns happening. Like it is not to that level. So although it is very bad for Canada in some cases, there is certainly a lot of job losses. We are not seeing a massive amount of credit tightening like you did in the US during this time, but you are seeing a lot of, maybe call it, caution in the market. So for what we have known in our market, a lot of credit has disappeared, and the banks are tightening up their underwriting. They are being very careful, and there are certain types of loans they just will not look at right now. And that is mostly development land, but they are also being very careful on what we call IPP, so income producing properties on the commercial scale. So, office buildings has been beat down pretty bad, but they're now starting to see some, call it a recovery in that market, but that market is still quite difficult. Retail is one of the few bright spots in the market for commercial properties. Service-based retail, like, pharmacies, grocery anchored retail plazas, extremely in demand. We just sold something in Markham. We had 100 groups interested in multiple offers.
Wow.
You're still seeing some bright spots there. I don't sell hotels, but we have a team led by Alan Pirani that sells hotels. Hotels is very much a bright spot. A lot of the banks want to lend on hotels. It's an extremely good market still. A lot of liquidity there. And then industrial, it's very dependent. Industrial is still a bright spot in the market in some cases, but a lot of development land is sitting in industrial, so people are being quite careful. But residential is the most careful part about the entire cycle in commercial real estate. Multifamily apartment buildings, so larger stuff, maybe over 20 units is really what we're concentrated on, unless it's in the downtown core area. And that is still a fairly strong market. It's been kind of, I would say, mark to marketed. The pricing has come down from where it was, but it's come back up and it's stabilized. And this is because people borrow for apartment buildings all based on the 5-year Canada bond. So that Canada bond will kind of direct where the cap rates are. And multifamily buildings, so apartment buildings, they have been the most sensitive to interest rate changes of any asset class. So when we had that big rise in interest rates and it's now come partially down, you had the sales volume for apartment buildings basically disappear. 80% of it disappeared. It's started to come back now. So, to answer your question, that's kind of a roundabout way of saying their credit has tightened in certain aspects. It is very bad in certain aspects. There's lots of job losses in the construction market, but it's not every asset class. Hotels are doing extremely well. Retail is doing very well. Office is starting to have a recovery because it's been beat down for 5 years because of the pandemic and work from home, right? And industrial is having a little bit of a softening, but the leasing for industrial is still quite good. And the same for residential, as we talked about earlier. Still good residential leasing out there. Okay.
So you mentioned, sorry, go ahead, Brent.
Well, I was going to say, we got to talk about the new home catalog while we still have time. I don't know. You got a list of things to ask, Jeremiah. We just hit the first question so far.
Yeah. It was a multi-point question.
There you go.
So I know you posted about the new home catalog, and I know you're not into the sort of the retail stuff, but I don't know, isn't it handy to have a catalog? I picked this one, build that one.
Listen, let's talk seriously. I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie in Northern Ontario, and my neighborhood was my second neighbor I lived in was connected to all this. I don't even know what you call it. It was from the 50s and 60s when Canada was building these home catalog type product, right? It was there was a ton of these. All my buddies lived in this, in one neighborhood next door to mine, and these were because I lived next to the armories where the military was, right? And so these were all built for families who came back from the war, right? These war houses. And there was one neighborhood, it was all these houses, it must have been 200, 300 acres. And so there is a good point to actually creating housing quickly and having basically a product that you can build as quickly as possible. My comment to it was, why are they concentrating on doing this when this will affect the design and architectural industry? This is an industry that's already slowing down, but this is an industry that makes money on designing houses and preparing plans for the market. So by creating a catalog where the entire country can build these off of plans and not have to use a designer, an architect, an interior designer, you're getting rid of an entire industry's use and need for this. Now, how much this actually affects the market, I don't know. But my point was just why get into this? It seemed to me, it really seemed like they were affecting maybe 5% of the building process when there is such massive changes structurally they could do to actually getting more houses built. Because, and this is the rant I go on constantly, for a condo downtown Toronto, effectively 30% of the house value, the condo value, is tax. And so if 30% is tax in a market where there is zero sales, if you were to get rid of that 30%, would that market then say it was, the project was $1,000 a square foot to buy? If you get rid of that 30%, you can now buy it at $700 a square foot. That is on an average, let's call it 500,000 square foot or $500,000 unit. Your mortgage is going to be, let's probably somewhere around 3, 4, 5,000 a month, somewhere in that range, 4,000 a month. So if your mortgage is that much a month, and I think I'm a little overstating, I think it's closer to 3,500. But if you have $3,500 a month, and then you all of a sudden get rid of $300,000 $300 a square foot, which would amount to roughly 700. So, let's call it you're back at $350,000 for the unit. You just lost $150,000 you have to pay either by cash or mortgage. That's going to amount to somewhere around, let's call it $1,000 to $1,500 a month that you're paying monthly. That's a significant change. That's your grocery cost right there and your gas cost right there. So anyways, this is a roundabout way of saying, why would the country and the feds concentrate on speeding up the design process, which is maybe 1 to 3 months, when you could concentrate on the taxes in delivering those new projects, or you could speed up the process that right now for a condo is somewhere between 30 to 38 months to actually get approval in the ground. Why would you not tackle that part? And so that to me just doesn't make sense, because whether you're building on ground related product like a townhouse or a single family home or a semi, or you're building an apartment building or a high rise, all these lands have to go through this massive entitlement process. And this is the municipality, this is the city that we're dealing with. And that city has a very slow process, and they also add on a lot of municipal development taxes. So I get that the feds can't really change the taxes at the municipality level, but they can change the HST, the GST, and then they can work with the province for the PSD, right? Which makes up your HST. But, to put some kind of lever in effect that would change what the municipalities would charge for it, wouldn't that be more effective, right? And then to change the funding to say for the feds, listen, we'll deal with the budget shortfalls if you have infrastructure costs. These are ideas. I mean, most people would tell me, oh, you're just trying to prop up the development industry. And I'm not trying to do that, because I understand that, it's a private industry. They need to deal with, the lows and the highs of a cycle too. I get that. What I'm trying to say is that the structural effects of how they tax new housing just doesn't really make sense. If 1/3 of your house is taxed, show me any other product in Canada other than maybe like gasoline where your tax is making up 1/3 of it, and it's something to do with your daily living. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so, but if you look at the new home catalog, they don't have like 30-story towers in there that you can just drop at any intersection in Toronto with exactly. Expedited approvals. That might move the needle a little bit.
Okay, how much money is the city of Toronto sitting on in development charges? Do you know?
Well, I checked that I think a year ago, and there's an economist named Mike Moffat who's tracking that too. But Ontario, I think in total held something like $12.5 billion in development charges, unused development charges. And so there is a structure, and I don't understand this completely. So, I don't want to speak out of turn, but it a little bit frustrates me if I understand it correctly. They've taken in all these development charges on these different projects. And they also have parkland levies they've taken in, which is 10% of the cost of the land. And they haven't used them because there is a policy from the province level that only allows them to use on certain things. So apparently they're going out and taking lines of credit against the cash and using those lines of credit for whatever they want versus actually using the cash that was dedicated for it. So if you look at the entire Toronto development charge budget per year, which, if I'm remembering correctly, it's somewhere around 400 to 700 million a year, depending on the year. That budget is supposed to be used for actual infrastructure development around housing. And to my understanding, it's not actually being used for that, which doesn't make sense because the City of Toronto has a budget shortfall. So the question I always ask is, why not use a much more fair tax that would be something the entire city uses, right? Some kind of either a tax or a pay per use, where if you're building a new building, instead of having a clump of cash having to be paid up front, make the taxes of that building higher for the next 10 years. It's something they do in the States. It's like a tax proceeds for that building. So it's like, okay, our tax is 50% higher than if it was one block over because we're in a new development. So then people can actually budget for it. The developer can budget for it. If it's an apartment building and it's rents, they're just paying for it on a weekly, in an annual basis, versus taking a budget of $400 to $600 or $700 million a year and forcing all the people who buy new houses that year to pay for that budget. That's what just doesn't make sense, right? Like, think about it.
That's absurd.
Because they're not just used for those, on average, this was like 20,000 people a year buying new condos in the Toronto area. So that means 20,000 people are effectively having to pay for this, $700 million, budget in a sense. So it doesn't really make sense to me. It's like, well, wait a second. If we change the sewers all around this development, we do it up and down the streets, not just one building that's benefiting from that. The actual developer who's doing that building, they already have to pay for the servicing into their building. They pay for those upgrades on that site. They're not paying for the entire street upgrades and everything, right? So I don't know. It's another thing that makes sense to me.
Well, I get the theory, right? If you're adding like 100 units worth of wastewater, well, probably you got to upgrade that sewer, right? Unless somebody at some point thought ahead and was like, we're going to put in like an 8-foot one instead of a 6-foot. So yeah, I kind of get it. But the fact that they're sitting on these vast amounts of development charges is like, yeah, maybe it's not unused. Maybe it's a little much, right? Growth pays for growth.
They use the one for like $6 million to change the name of Yonge and Dundas Square to Santoka Square. I forget the name of it. So I'm like, what? We're using that to change a name, but not infrastructure. I don't know that exactly, so I don't want to quote it too well, but that's just weird to me. And I should add an asterisk to all this. This is for infill projects where I'm talking about this. For greenfield projects, I get it. Like you're dealing with literally farmland with nothing there, and you have to build new sewers, you have to build roads, you have to build water treatment plants. Like that is where development charges are actually being used directly for the site. But when you're dealing with a condo tower that is being built on 3 homes and it's going to end up 400 homes, why exactly is that same condo tower charging at 400 homes, charging somewhere between, $15 to $20 million in development charges on that one project? And that was 3 houses in the past, right? It just doesn't make sense. The servicing's already there, and the upgrades to the water and sewer capacity, that is required, but that's not the full part of the development charges. So
yeah, it'd be interesting to do the math. Anyway, so go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, I want to ask a little bit of a different direction here. So like family formations versus building design. So this is something kind of Mark and I have been thinking about, because we talk about, birth rates and the size of families. Hey, people aren't having as many kids as they were. And I think we were talking to Daniel Foch a few episodes ago, just to kind of get his thoughts on it too. And like, what comes first? Like, the building design, because in a sense, once you plan out a building and you build it, it just stands there for like the longest time, right? Forever. And maybe you go in and you renovate in like 200 years and change to the units. But like, if we're building condos that are 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, bachelor, like 200 square feet, whatever it is that forming our Canadian demographics? Like having an impact on the number of kids people are having? Or do you think it's the other way around? Because is it that people aren't having kids, so developers see that and they're like, hey, you know what? Like, we just got to build smaller units? Because I'm wondering if we're going to run into a pickle here where we have a ton of like these really dense, small units. But I don't know who you talk to, but like, I feel like every one of my friends and people I know is just like, I want to live in a ground oriented house with a bunch of bedrooms in my own detached house, and they don't aspire to live in a condo. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, because you're in this world.
Yeah, you know what? It's a good question, Brent. It's one of the most misunderstood parts of our market, because most people say, and like, I don't know if you know Ron Butler, Angry Mortgage guy. Like he's funny. Had lunch with him Monday, and we were just laughing how everyone calls them dog crate condos now because the truth is the market wasn't always like this. In the 90s and 2000s, developers were building buildings to actually be lived in, large 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms that were like 1,000 square feet that, you could really live in. What changed was the structure of the bank financing and the incentive to build. So developers had to sit there and build an end user building. And so they go out and they have a building with a ton of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms and some 1 bedrooms. And because me or you or someone who has a family is saying, I need to live in something today, so I can't buy something off plans that is 4 years down the road for my family. Most people don't do that. Although I think, it's kind of the way I was able to afford something originally. I would save into it, but I digress. A whole nother story. So all the developers realized I am not able to sell at the same velocity, the same amount of speed as selling end user product, because I have to get to 70 or 80% sales in order to trigger my construction costs and actually build the building. So the incentive was, how do I sell as quickly as possible so that I'm not paying this massive land loan cost to actually, end up eating into my profit. And in some cases, I don't want to go bankrupt because I have this land loan. I gotta sell units and get this into production. So because the banks would only sell pre-sales, the developer then started to make their units smaller and smaller and smaller, because they found that the only people who are willing to buy units off plans are typically either single persons or investors who want to rent out these units. And what was the easiest unit to rent out in the past? It was the 1 bedroom. And what was the easiest unit to sell on plans? It was the 1 bedroom. And so it's just all incentive, right? It's that famous Charles Munger quote. It's like, show me incentive and I'll show you outcome, right? So it's truly how it happened. I don't think it happened on purpose overnight, but slowly as the developers started to learn the market, they started to realize, wait a second, the smaller units are always going to sell quicker. So we bought this expensive land. We need to move this into production. We're going to build smaller and smaller units, which is why the city started to fight back and say, no, you are mandated to do 10% 3-bedroom units. So in my mind, I've always said we actually need some bank to step up and do financing like in the US, like in Miami or something like that, where they actually build these buildings where people actually live in them. They're used to high-rise living in Miami and in New York. They build all these projects where in some projects you won't even see one bedroom or 1 studio apartment, right? They're all 2 bedrooms, they're all 3 bedrooms, they're all 4 bedrooms, right? So it's the structure of our finance that has caused the 1 bedrooms. And to your point, Brent, I do think that there are effects and some kind of, maybe not causation, but correlation with the fact that, everything's more expensive. And for me to buy a home to have enough space for a family and to have kids in, I'm not incentivized to do that because I live in a 1 bedroom and I have a job in downtown Toronto, and I got to buy a house in Pickering. I don't really want to go to Pickering. I want to live in Toronto, right? So there is a disincentive to have children right now. And I was the first of 5 kids. I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, and when we were growing up, at one point we didn't have enough bedrooms for all the children, right? So I was literally sleeping in my little sister's bedroom in a pink room, and my mom's like, "Okay, honey," to my dad, "I think we need a house we can all fit in," right? So, but that was back then when my parents sold our house for 150 grand. And they found a house with more bedrooms for 350 grand, right? In this too, right? So way different market. But but the point is that like I always wanted to have a lot of kids, and okay, I'm part of the problem. I'm single. I don't have children.
There you go, listeners.
Oh, we gotta fix that. Listeners out there looking for a successful
You work
young
too
man.
hard, Jeremiah. You work way
I know
too
that
hard.
it literally it is the truth. Yeah. I was like, I woke up. I'm like, yeah, I work way too much. As I said, we're Friday at 5:00, and the whole team's still here. But
man.
the point is, like, I do want to have a family. I want to have kids, and maybe I'm in a different situation than others. But there was a study done in the U.S. by a developer who is trying to make more family-size units, and they found a big correlation between a housing stock that had more family-size units and families willing to have more children. So I 100% agree with where you're going with this. I hope it happens. And I just finished a 6-plex that I'm building, and I did 2 4-bedroom units for families. And so I rented one out to a single dad with a bunch of kids. And, I'm trying to help that. But I really, truly think that we need a different source of financing for the high-rise stuff, for the mid-rise stuff. CMHC is doing a great job with this. And the rental buildings is actually really helping quite a bit, because if you can build a bunch of 3 beds and 2 beds, these are actually leasing really well right now. So the incentive is starting to change. That dog crate condo incentive has disappeared. You can't sell a 1-bedroom anyways now. And, I truly, dogs are angry.
Kids got home.
Kids got home. Yeah. Speaking of children,
you got to put them in a dog crate in the sky, Mark.
Yeah, I know. But anyways, I do completely agree. We need to build way more family style housing. And I realize that the conservative side of don't like the urban living, the 15-minute cities. But, if you live in somewhere like Manhattan, you live in somewhere like Miami, and it's very walkable, or Toronto and some of these, neighborhoods. There is something really nice about living in an apartment that is a family style.
Yeah. And we talk about like the meaning in life versus like the finance side of it too, right? Like just, like I think people get this whole, like, I want to live in a 1-bedroom, have a sweet job. And then like after a few years, like, wait a minute, like I kind of want to have a family. And then you turn around and all the infrastructure is not in place to do that. And you got to completely change your entire lifestyle, uproot everything. And it's like, talk about incentives. Like, are you incentivized to move to Pickering and like, commute, or are you going to get a different job? Like, that's not going to happen. Right. So
I live in a 3-bedroom, for the record, so I'm preparing for it, planning.
There you go.
There you go, ladies. He's ready to go.
All right.
I might move into the 4-bedroom. We're not sure yet.
So I think I made you read that study, Brent. That was Bobby Fejan, I think, right?
Yes.
Put that one out. Exactly. So we want to get him on, because we're interested in that model. But
it's so needed. It's massively. Yeah.
So I got one last question for you.
Catalog, whatever.
One last question. You're talking about financing and how money sort of informs what, like how things work in the world, right? So that leads us to our other hobby horse. What would you rather have? And this doesn't have to be either or, but would you rather have real estate or Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, is this like all my money, Bitcoin or real estate, one or the other? Like zero-sum question?
Well, no, because I know the answer is like both, and that's our answer too. But I mean, if you had to pick one, what do you think?
If you had to pick one, I mean, it's hard for me to say Bitcoin because I understand real estate so well. I'll say this, it's kind of funny because when I was a research analyst starting the business, my other friend was a close friend, was also a research analyst. He was at a consulting firm. I was at Colliers. And we used to go around to the sales centers of all these condo projects, and we would go there and pick up sheets and look at the pricing so we could really understand it. We used to do this, literally on our 2 feet and walking in. Anyways, in one of those periods of time, while we're sitting there just like so bored, like waiting for a pricing sheet, we start searching out something, and he actually brought up Bitcoin. This is like when I started in the industry, 2011. And he's like, we should buy some of this. And and I'm sitting there going, yeah, but can't we buy some land and build something? Wouldn't we rather do that? So yeah, he always reminds me that I'm the idiot who decided to get into real estate. So I know all too well about Bitcoin. And I have a few friends who are in the development industry. They took profits and bought Bitcoin years ago from a condo project and put it into Bitcoin. They've done extremely well. But I would say, my answer is that you have to put money into what you believe and you understand. And so, Bitcoin to me, it makes a lot of sense, especially Ethereum. There's a lot of functional uses for it. And eventually I think real estate will be traded on some sort of blockchain. So I think you can eventually buy both. But right now, it's probably better to buy Bitcoin unless you're going to build. My rant today is that there is no better time to build apartment buildings today because land costs are down. In some cases, 60, 70%. You don't pay HST, that's 13% cost on margin. The absorption for rental is still there. And construction costs, in some cases, have come down 25 to 40%. So there's all kinds of incentives to build apartment buildings. And I'm doing this myself right now, just in a very small scale, the sixplex. But I think if you were a builder, you were a doer, if you are someone who is productive, and you can do that yourself, I think is a very good time to do that. If you're not, then obviously there are great things like, sure, go buy some. Why not?
Yeah, the adding value part and real estate is and generate income, right? Like real estate can generate income for
exactly.
you.
Bitcoin don't buy a cap rate, build a cap rate.
Right. Okay.
I think that is an excellent way to end this off. That's a very succinct quote. So I don't know if any of our listeners are going to want to, but where can people find you, Jeremiah, or get a hold of you?
So I'm active on Twitter, J Shamess, Instagram, J Shamess, LinkedIn, Jeremiah Shamess. My email is jeremiah.shamess@colliers.com. Pretty reachable. collierscanada.com is our website. You search for Jeremiah, pretty easy to find. And otherwise, reach out to me with any questions about the market. Always happy to talk the markets. And thanks for having me on, Mark and Brent. It's been a pleasure talking all sorts of different things. I hope I didn't bore anyone too much, but I'm always happy.
Final question. Prediction for the prediction for the Jays game tonight.
Oh, I think it will be a very difficult game. It'll be very close, but the Jays are going to win Game 6 in the 6.
Oh. You heard it here first, folks. All right. Thanks very much, Jeremiah. So to our listeners, thanks for sticking with us. And until next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
If you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To learn more about the show, head on over to twostewards.ca and explore our free resources. To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.
Nailed it.